Every parent wants their child to be a judge, a doctor, or any white-collar job they can brag about. No parent wants their child to tread a challenging career path. After his father's death, a young boy studies hard and resolves to become a scientist, a doctor, or a developer, not because his family is poor, but because he wants to make money. Contrary to popular opinion, one day his mother informs him that he is destined to be a shaman, and it is either that or he will face grave consequences. But he refuses and studies harder to achieve his goals. 10 years later, as an adult, Gerard dies in a car accident and is reincarnated as a professor at the Academy of Magic in a different world where magic and science coexist, unlike Earth. Gerard enjoys his second chance at life, exploring his surroundings and adjusting to his new environment. He is on a trip on the Magic Locomotive Train, a luxurious trip only meant for the rich, to the Exilion Empire, the biggest city on the continent, known for being the magic engineering city. He relives how far he has come in his new life inside Gerard's room compartment. In his new world, phones and gadgets do not exist. He busies himself with newspapers and articles, where he reads articles about his destination and the train. As the Magic Locomotive Train departs, Gerard hopes to be alone in his compartment. Just then, a young man enters the compartment as the second passenger. Gerard decides to bury his face in the reading material to avoid making small talk with the other passenger, who seemed polite enough. Soon, the young man sees the headlines of the just-finished war in one of the continent's factions and starts a conversation about it with Gerard. He introduces himself as Ludger Chelisy, a professor at the Empire's largest magic academy, Sorin. In the New World, everyone with a surname is a nobleman, and those without are commoners. Ludger reveals the rumor that the princess of that faction won the war with the help of a mercenary named Machiavelli. Gerard pretends not to know anything about the name, which is a lie, as Machiavelli was the identity he used before Gerard. Naturally, Gerard is already suspicious of Ludger, as he wonders why a man he just met on the train will be discussing the issues of a mercenary with him. Gerard subtly put his guard up and remains vigilant in hopes that his new fake identity is not in danger, or that Ludger was not a spy sent by the princess of the faction from the war. Still pretending to read the news material, he studies Ludger from the side and decides to act casually with the curious and interesting man. Gerard engaged Ludger in a conversation about Sorin, which houses and teaches the students of witchcraft and wizardry. Ludger shares the details of his appointment with Gerard, who is filled with admiration for him, as becoming a professor in the institute is a challenging fit. As they continued the conversation, Gerard glanced at the window and began to feel an odd sensation like something unpleasant was about to happen. When Ludger opened his mouth to say something, a loud explosion rocked the train, throwing things and people off balance. Ludger and Gerard tried to maintain their stability and regain themselves as they heard movement from various places. Amidst the confusion, Gerard wondered who would carelessly attack a magic-protected train with emergency alarms, especially one headed for the Empire. After some time, he deduced that there might be a magician among the robbers who would help them escape after the robbery. Unfortunately, while magic is meant for good things, some people enjoy doing bad things with it. On this trip, Gerard is disguised as a commoner in his 40s who is rich. Ludger is a younger man in his 20s. Therefore, he removed a magic wand from his luggage and led the way out of their compartment. Outside, they saw nobody in sight, and Gerard assumed that the thieves were after the aristocrats in the VIP compartment, since they would have more valuables. Suddenly, a disheveled man crashes through the window, and Ludger incapacitates him with magic. The man laughs hysterically, and before Ludger can stop him, he reveals a bomb from his coat and releases the detonator, and a huge explosion sweeps through the fourth compartment. Gerard woke up and picked himself up from the broken debris on the floor. Luckily, he sustained no injuries, but his attempt at looking older using a camouflage mask was already ruined from grazing the debris, so he peeled off and disposed of the mask. What they perceived to be an ordinary robbery turned out to be more like some crazy fanatics had attempted to destroy the train. Gerard reasoned that perhaps they were rebels from the prince's faction of the war, but he simply put the thoughts away. Looking at the damage, he tries to look for Ludger, but discovers that the explosion must have swept him away. Gerard said a quick prayer for him and decided to run away. Suddenly, a door opened, revealing a conductor with a tense face. The conductor checked on Gerard's well-being, who calmly explained what happened while closing the distance between them. Gerard grabbed the conductor's collar and threw him on the ground for an investigation. As he continues his act of innocence, Gerard reveals that the train couldn't have been attacked without an inside person to disconnect the magic protector for the attackers. At this, the conductor knew that his game was up and began to struggle against Gerard, who quickly overpowered him by sweeping his arms around his back. Gerard threatened the conductor with a knife, but he refused to say anything. The door to another compartment opened, and rapid shots from a machine gun filled the air. Gerard threw the conductor at the bullets and ducked for safety. As the men closed in, Gerard started a conversation to buy time. Drawing farther towards the blown part of the train, Gerard stopped while the men drew their swords. Without warning, he cast the spell he had prepared, and a gust of wind enveloped the men, throwing them out of the train. Another set of attackers came out from a different compartment, and Gerard broke their guns with a spell. He prepared another spell to defeat them, but it was no use because they had a wizard amongst them. The wizard canceled the next spell, and Gerard began to count how long he would need to wait for the rescue team. The tides were unfavorable for Gerard, as it turns out that there is not only one wizard in the attacking group, but 5, one of which is of level 4, a high rank in wizardry which cannot be easily defeated. Gerard tries to negotiate with his attackers to be left alone, but they pay him no mind. Mayhem, the leader of the attackers, reasoned that they could take him down, as it is doubtful that Gerard's wizardry ranked higher than theirs. Suddenly, Gerard threw himself off the train, and they concluded that he was dead. One of the attackers leaned over to confirm Gerard's death, and a burst of light swept him out, killing him instantly. The other attackers began to wonder how Gerard survived as they saw him on the train's roof. Gerard deceived the men into thinking he was running to the train's rear, and they took the bait. At the rear, they met with a trap he prepared, taking out many attackers. In anger, Mayhem directs the others towards a compartment where he thinks Gerard will be this time, but they're met with another trap, which takes out the remaining wizards. Mayhem barely survives the brutal attack, and he confronts Gerard for killing them, and Gerard retorts that they equally wanted him dead. Just then, the Frontier Night Guards protecting the Empire arrive to intervene. Gerard had seen the white-armored knights arriving in shadows and left them to take Mayhem out, which he did not hesitate to do. He returned to his cabin looking unhurt and as if he had not just fought for his life. In a few minutes, the armored knights cleared out the remaining attackers and went around the train, calming the survivors down for the arrival, which was not much, as the only people that survived were the highly secured VIP section of the train, where extremely wealthy people are. Soon, the city's beauty began to surface, with tower-like buildings and chimneys from the busy industries sounding. Gerard could not help but note the gorgeous view of the metropolitan city and its exotic nature. The extraordinary views and infrastructure were courtesy of engineering combined with magic, which came out beautifully. 27 years ago, Gerard was reborn as a baby into his new world after the accident. The new world is referred to as the Victorian era, the Epoch Age, which still houses magic, no human races, and monsters. Just then, one of the white-armored knights who had saved Gerard from Mayhem, Veronica, entered his cabin to check on his well-being. Gerard assures her that he is fine and unhurt from the fight, and she goes on to make casual conversation with him. As she asked his name, the train signified its arrival with a blaring horn, cutting him short. Reporters and journalists, passers-by, concerned citizens, security personnel, and family members lined up the pavement to receive the passengers as word of the attack preceded their arrival. Everyone believed that the white-armored knights had saved the situation, which was amusing to Gerard, as he had done most of the work before their arrival. Security operatives rushed into the train and asked all passengers to remain seated for identification because an insider who still may be on board had assisted the raid. A cold sweat broke out on Gerard because he had a fake identity, a punishable offense anywhere in the world. In the Empire, it was commonly punished with death by hanging, which was scary to Gerard. Gerard's identity had been faked by the mask, which made him look like a man in his 40s, with whiskers and a bit of wrinkle. The Gerard in his 40s, as presented by the identity card, was disposed of alongside his mask. Gerard provided his identification to the personnel, and Veronica explained how helpful he was in fighting the attackers. Luckily, the personnel confused Gerard for Ludger, the Magic Academy professor. Without hesitation, Gerard agrees to the claim and picks up Ludger's suitcase, claiming his identity. Photographs have yet to be popularized in Gerard's new world to his advantage. The few pictures of people available were commonly in black and white with bad quality, making it challenging to identify people. Hence, people were identified by clothes, age, and overall physique. While Gerard felt a little hint of remorse for claiming Ludger's identity, he firmly convinced himself that he was dead and must not die alongside, so he embraced the confusion. At the mention of Soren, the Magic Academy, the earlier suspicious officer and Veronica regarded Gerard with more respect, and the officer apologized for being rude. Gerard held everyone's attention as they whispered about his supposed talent. To extend his apology for the rude reception, the officer insists on letting a guard escort Gerard out of the train. Gerard felt uncomfortable amongst the guards, but they insisted. Bidding Veronica and everyone else farewell, Gerard walked out of the train with Ludger's identity. The guard walked Gerard through the crowded train station, creating a passage for him as they moved. After the crowded area, Gerard politely thanked the guard and told him to leave. Now alone, he sighed in relief for narrowly escaping prison and continued walking. After a few steps forward, a man called out to him, and he looked back. Mr. Wilford introduced himself as an employee of Soren Academy, sent to check on him when the news of the raid broke out. Gerard knew he was cornered, as he could not deny his newly stolen identity to the older man. Instead, he climbed into the car with the man and they left. Veronica had started admiring Gerard from the moment she saw him use magic while fighting the attackers. She found him extraordinary and different in a good way. She carefully recalled all her observations about him and concluded that she would ask her sibling, who goes to Soren, about him. On the ride to Soren, Gerard went through a list of excuses to get himself out of the situation, but could not come up with anything. Since his identity as Gerard died with the raid, he decided to process a new one at a later date through the underworld, as it was cheaper that way. On arrival, Mr. Wilford directs Gerard to the principal's office, where he meets a young-looking woman that may be a 6th-rank magician. Though she gives him an unusual feeling, he gathers his wits and introduces himself. Gerard took note of the principal's looks and her fine-colored hair. In turn, she offered him a warm smile, welcoming him to the academy and asking about his health from the terrible incident he was involved in. Gerard feels naked in her presence because a part of him thinks that since she is a wizard, she will soon find out what he has done, especially since she has an odd smile playing on her face. The principal revealed that she had never met Ludger in person, but only through his papers and prestige, which made Gerard calmer. She gave the contract of appointment to him, where he saw the huge salary he would be paid for his 2 years contract. Initially, Gerard had only resolved to keep the offer till he had his new fake identification details, but the monthly compensation and incentives changed his mind immediately. While the principal was waiting for his response, Gerard thought of different things he could use the money for and how comfortable he would be living after his contract. At the same time, he understood that teaching in a school as prestigious as Soren would require a lot from him. From childhood, in this new world, Gerard has lived through life by bluffing and smooth-talking his way out of situations. He made up his mind to do the same at Soren and accepted the contract. Mr. Wilford took him to his assigned quarters, a 2-story house similar to what Gerard had only seen in fairy tales. Mr. Wilford informed him that the students would not resume until later. Therefore, he had a few weeks to himself. Gerard explored the exquisite living space, befitting an aristocrat, with no hint of dust or substandard material, but only the best of everything. Having claimed Ludger's identity, he decided to get to know him a little to fit better into the role. However, Gerard finds out that Ludger's luggage is secured by a magic circle. Using his mana, he broke the spell using a trick to access the contents of the bags. Opening the luggage, Gerard finds only basic materials inside. He deduced that Ludger was in no way a materialistic person. He had only books on various subjects, the inquiries from Soren, a few impersonal letters, clothes, and his course content for the students. In his documents, Gerard learns that Ludger was an orphan with no siblings, who served in the military, and had submitted significant materials in magic 12 times as a 4th-rank magician. Ludger's personality fascinates Gerard. He set aside the coursework for the students and looked through the remaining luggage, sorting them appropriately. Gerard decides to check out the land's topography to know his surroundings. Just then, his stomach gurgled, and he postponed his adventure till the next day to get food and retire for the day. 2 weeks have passed since Gerard has been impersonating Ludger at Soren. Gerard has become more in tune with his surroundings and has explored every place possible. As it drew nearer to the resumption date, students began arriving at school in fancy uniforms, rumored to have been made by the best designer in the empire. Gerard sat in a shop, drinking coffee and taking notes of his environment, enjoying and observing the carefree atmosphere around the young people, which he could not relate to when he was their age. Students flew about with brooms and other objects as expected of a magic institute. As Gerard finished up to go, a woman arrived and took a seat close to him. She asked why he did not reach out when he came, as other members were worried about him. Gerard knew he was in trouble, as he could not relate to her inquiries. Nervously examining her face, he answered her questions. He learned that she was Ludger's subordinate, whatever the organization was about, as she respectfully addressed him. Gerard used that knowledge to gain information from her, and learned that Ludger worked for a secret organization trying to find their way into Soren. He reread the letters in his room and found coded messages in them. Gerard realized that Ludger's identity was fake and non-existent, and was carefully crafted for his mission at Soren. Gerard flopped to the floor, realizing that he was in more trouble than he knew. Gerard assessed his newly found situation. Caught between a secret society he knows nothing about and Soren Academy, his life is already in grave danger, because if any one of the parties finds his secret, he will be killed. Gerard tries to bring the puzzle pieces together to learn more information. From what he had learned, the organization was not ordinary but highly dangerous, operating with brutal force and zero pity for offenders. Ludger was a first-level executive in the organization alongside another person. For Gerard to maintain his secret, he needed to know his level mate, who was also among the over 30 society members who penetrated the academy. Furthermore, there were third and second level members who were Ludger's subordinates. From his interaction with the lady, Gerard figured that Ludger was ill-mannered, which helped him to assume the character excellently. He discovers their cipher communication codes through the letters and learns more information. Gerard checked through the books in Ludger's bags, and after a while, he found an odd one out. Gerard picked up the book and cautiously examined the worn parts. Going through the overused pages, he found similarities between the language and the language used in Ludger's supposed country home. He successfully decoded a few sentences of information from the letters. Someone wrote to Ludger to take up a false job at the academy to learn about it, while the organization will provide him with the necessary information to use in his mission. Gerard considered many options to escape his situation, including finding and killing members of the organization, but he had no clue about the membership and how to proceed. He considered confiding in the academy's leaders, but decided against it. Gerard figured that the secret society understood that the academy had great power, and they could not openly take it down. He resolved to learn information about the organization and leak it to the academy, which would keep him from fighting them directly. For the time being, Gerard decided to focus on being a good teacher, as it was essential to gain favor. Soon, the first day of school arrived, with students happily reuniting amongst themselves and speculating about the new teacher. Just then, Gerard walks into the class. Gerard makes his grand entrance in a carefully selected attire to communicate his personality to the students. At once, every student fell silent and was completely spellbound by his mien and quiet movements. At the podium, he carefully dropped his notes and made a show of using magic to control his cap, and it carefully landed at its designated spot. Gerard introduced himself as Ludger Chelsea and the course he would be teaching the class. He invited interested students from other classes to freely attend the class, as he would teach them in a sophisticated and lenient manner. At this notice, the second-year students murmured about taking lessons with their juniors, but Gerard mindfully controlled the class as though he was an actor on stage. While preparing for the class, Gerard carefully planned how to make his way around the students to avoid being incompetent. Allowing Year 1 students to take his class will decrease the level of complaints and side talks from students, as they are new to the system and inexperienced. While he figured that the Year 2 students would be distracted by how strict he will be with them, he pointedly warned the class not to expect free credits and gave further instructions to dissuade people from registering for his class. After making his points, the class suddenly became very quiet, with nobody daring to ask questions. Gerard prompted the students to ask questions, but they all refused, and he dismissed the class. Afterwards, he secretly hoped that his method of protecting his secret had not been overturned against him. Gerard is determined to maintain Ludger's ex-soldier personality and resolves to be very strict with the students. Since they still had time to change their preferred courses, he hoped they would drop his course because of his strict nature. Stepping into the hallway, he walked leisurely away. Within the hall, students avoided his path deliberately. Just then, a young woman named Selena caught his attention and introduced herself as his colleague in the academy. Gerard tried to disguise his surprise at her approach and answered politely, but she offered him food before he could. There were 5 new professors at Soren with 3 commoners, Selina, Marilda, and Brino. There was one fallen aristocrat, Ludger, and an aristocrat named Chris. While the reception from the commoners was warm and welcoming, the aristocrats behaved snobbishly and rudely. Still, in the hallway, the others took turns in introducing themselves to Gerard and offering to eat together, because he only wanted to see what the other new professors looked like in hopes that they would be his hind. Mostly, the nobles in Sorin Academy and everywhere in Gerard's new society are known to distinguish themselves from the commoners and fallen aristocrats. While Selina and the others found his behavior offensive, Gerard did not seem to mind as he proceeded to lunch with the others. Gerard remained vigilant because he was unsure if any of the new professors willing to be friends with him were members of the secret society. According to the information he got, the other first executive in his rank is also a professor. Therefore, he needed to be cautious, as he or she could be the one watching him. He proceeded to lunch with everyone except Chris, who left them in the hallway. At lunch, Gerard maintained minimal conversation with the others, and they were grateful that someone other than their fellow commoner willingly talked to them. Selina naturally has low self-esteem and is frightened at associating with and even teaching nobles, including members of the royal family. All her life, she was used to being looked down upon because she was a commoner. She tried to relate with other professors to help her cope with her anxieties about the job, which is why she ate lunch with everyone. Selina is particularly fascinated by Gerard's demeanor and how he relates with everyone else like a god among men. Gerard looked and acted like royalty to her, but she considers him too strict. Marilda calmed her fears about the job, advising her to remain in control and deliver her best. 3 days after Gerard's first encounter with the students, he expected only a few students in the class being the first day of lectures, but was surprised to see more than 60 students seated and waiting for him. The reaction to Gerard's introductory class was not very good, as students, especially aristocrats, felt angry at his guts. Others were purely curious and excited to be associated with a professor of high esteem. In the secret society, the First Order and the Third other members were mostly students. The students needed more information about the new professor, so they were still determining what to expect from him, apart from all he said in the introductory class. A Third Order student posted an article on the school's community, popularly referred to as Akashic Records. The student was tasked with gaining students for Ludger's class by the secret society. Therefore, the article contained praises for Ludger's achievements both in magic and as a soldier, which attracted the students to register for his course. In Sorin, the maximum limit of students in a class was 80. As Gerard entered the class, he discovered that not a single seat was left untaken. Gerard wondered if his earlier attempt at threatening them was in vain, considering the full class, or if somebody somewhere went to spread false information about him to get students for his class. Gerard decided that the students simply called his bluff and showed up to see what he had to offer. After the initial shock, Gerard noticed that about 60% of the population were first-year students. He introduced the course to them with the promise to teach them the 4 ways of magic casting system. Though he still needed to gain complete mastery of all 4, Gerard knew enough to excel at taking the students. Flora Lumos is one of the nobles from the Duke family. She is particularly popular for her brilliance in magic casting and her beauty. So far, Flora has successfully made 2 professors quit their jobs because she humiliated their knowledge in class. She called Gerard's bluff, because people can rarely learn and even teach all 4 methods. For the semester, she considered Gerard her prey, against her friend's plea to not do so. At the podium, Gerard wrote on the magic board by casting his mana and promised to teach the students a technique that is 3 times faster than the usual casting method, which awed the class. Unlike the first-year students who were unfamiliar with spells, the second-year students were already familiar with them. A good faction of the class thought that Gerard was lying, because not even the best magicians and researchers in history could achieve that. Further research has been carried out concerning the casting system, and nobody has been able to do that. Flora simply regarded the idea as a joke and told her friend that perhaps Gerard would tell them that the casting time could be reduced by consistent learning till they were proficient, and in that manner they would be faster, which would not be completely accurate. Everyone continued to share their opinion about the professor's claims, and some were visibly angry that he would propose a farce, especially the acclaimed geniuses who like to do everything the straight and confident way. Earlier, Gerard warned that students can only ask questions with his permission. Also, they are not allowed to challenge his authority, which will earn them penalty points. Before teaching the technique, he allowed time for questions and answered them amicably. Flora interrupted by disagreeing with Gerard's claims. While he let it slide, he answered her question coldly, which annoyed Flora, as she did not gain the attention she hoped for. Nevertheless, she continued to argue with Gerard, confidently stating her point with facts to the admiration of her fellow students and their approval. Gerard calmly countered that the only reason there has been no improvement to the method applied to casting the magic is that magic had refused to give room for improvement. He exemplified this by stating that science can thrive because it welcomes improvement and different processes, which further annoyed the class. Gerard challenged Flora to cast her own technique, and she proudly did it in less than 4.50 seconds. While her fellow students cheered for her, Gerard coldly retorted that she was too slow, which stabbed her pride. With careful concentration and a different technique, Gerard achieved the same spell in 0.3 seconds, which brought the class, including Flora Lumos, to a humble standstill. Gerard called his technique the source code method. Unlike Earth, which was in the 21st century with different software programs and computer literacy, Gerard's present world is still stuck in what can be compared to Earth's 19th century. Gerard developed the source code method from the lessons of his master, which taught him magic in a different manner and his unique technique to advance his skills. He likens his use of magic to a programmer's use of codes and patterns, imprinted to be used later, instead of starting from scratch every time, unlike the magicians in his new world that started their magic from scratch every time they needed it. Sadly, Gerard's technique may only partially be entirely accepted because the world relies mainly on hardware. The students looked at Gerard with varied expressions and reception towards what he had just done, which Gerard could fully relate to because he was not expecting more. He only hopes that his bizarre knowledge will let him pass without complaints in order to succeed for the next 2 years of his contract. All the students who saw Gerard's technique developed a new respect for him. Everyone tried to make sense of what they had just seen because an average person could not comprehend it. The students longed to imitate their professor, who suddenly seemed perfect in their eyes. Gerard inwardly liked how he commanded the students' respect, but understood that if he wanted to keep it while avoiding trouble from the school and the secret society, he had to do more to keep the students interested. Also, Gerard decided to be careful of people like Flora Lumos. Flora stood by the side of the podium, gauging Gerard. As a genius, nobody had ever challenged her before, and Gerard's open challenge had hurt her pride. Gerard made her admit she was wrong before the whole class and punished her with 10 penalty points. Holding back her tears, she returned to her seat, where Gerard gave her 10 award points for a good performance. Flora maintained a calm expression for the remaining period, but deep down, she burned hot from the encounter. Gerard rounded up the class by following the instructions in the textbook and adding appropriate examples. To keep the students' attention, he promised to teach the source code technique to the best students in the class later. The students listened to his lecture without disturbing or attempting to counter his opinion. At the end of the class, he released them without giving any assignments, which earned him more adoration from the students. Aiden is a commoner and a freshman from the countryside, and he is particularly more enthusiastic about magic than some of the aristocrats. He had little hope for the magic casting class, especially after listening to what some students had to say about Gerard's first class. But after the just concluded class, his perception of Gerard and the class changed rapidly. Aiden openly talked about his admiration for Gerard while recounting the details of the class. He was particularly happy for not dropping the course, because he was genuinely pleased with its outcome and the professor lecturing them. Suddenly, Javan, another boy from his year, huffed rudely at him. At first, Aiden ignored him, but he continued by saying that they should have no commoners, because there was no reason to be amazed at Gerard's earlier display. Aiden was confused by the outburst. Just then, Leo, another student in their year, interrupted Javan's rant by insulting him and his family for discriminating against a commoner. Seeing that he had no supporter, Javan angrily stopped the fuss. Aiden thanked Leo for saving the situation and offered to walk with him to their next class together.